Paper money printed by the government has no intrinsic value. These two pieces of paper are worth nothing, and they're just pieces of paper. And honestly, the same thing could be said about gold or silver. All they really are types of metal, just like aluminum foil or zinc.
What are you talking about, Adam? Shouldn't you know that money and gold and silver is all valuable? Shouldn't you know all this if you have a YouTube channel just about money? Dislike, unsubscribe, leave a nasty comment. I'm never watching a video of yours again.
Okay, US paper money and gold and silver all have value, at least for now. But in and of itself, all this is a fancy little piece of paper. But if that's truly the case, why then do we not often see people doing things like this? Or this? And if this were true, why do so many people spend so much time and effort trying to get more of this kind of paper when they could very easily go and get a lot of this kind of toilet paper? What a great question. Well, in order to answer this, we need to understand what it means for something to have value. And I've thought about this for a while, and I've come up with 3 ways that we can tell if something is actually valuable. And the first thing that you need to know about value is that it's subjective. What's valuable to one person may not be valuable to another. For example, these pieces of art that come from the Dada period, some people would think that they are absolutely ridiculous and totally without value. Other people, on the other hand, would pay a fortune to own these original pieces. Similarly, other people may see this collage of digital artwork as something that's not really worth a lot of money. And you may be surprised to find out that this actually sold with an NFT for more than $69 million. Basically, what one person says is valuable won't necessarily match what you deem valuable. For example, somebody who values their family more than they do money may consider themselves extremely wealthy because they value those relationships, even if they don't have a lot of money in the bank. The other thing that determines value is utility of the thing that we're talking about. So imagine with me for a second that you're lost in the desert and you come across a single man and he has 2 objects and he says that you get to choose one or the other, but not both. One of the objects is an ingot of gold, and that's basically just a big bar of gold. And the other object is a shovel. And the man also tells you, underground, there's a very clean source of water. Which is more valuable in that moment to you? Well, it's one that's more useful. You have no real use of the ingot of gold. You have a ton of use for the shovel to help you get down to that clean water, which you're gonna need to survive. Another example of this is that while a hammer may be extremely valuable in some jobs, for certain others, maybe a wrench is even more valuable. And the third thing that can determine whether something is valuable is its level of scarcity. For example, if you go outside and find a rock, well, there's a billion rocks out there, and so they're not very valuable. However, if you went out and found a piece of gold, there's not so much of the gold out there, and so that scarcity drives up its value. As another example that might hit kind of close to home, if a lot of people left their houses and went and bought a ton of toilet paper and dried up all the shelves and you couldn't really find a lot of toilet paper anymore, then you may be willing to shell out a lot more money than you would have before just to get your hands on some of this toilet paper. As another example of scarcity, this happened to me and Lindsay just a couple years ago. We went to a mountain town just for the weekend and we were planning on coming home on Sunday night. However, Sunday afternoon, there was a huge blizzard that shut down the highways, and so we couldn't even get on the roads to come home. And so instead, we were stuck in this tiny mountain town where we had to get a hotel room. But everybody else was stuck in that mountain town as well, and there weren't so many hotels or hotel rooms left. And so what we ended up doing is going from hotel to hotel until we finally found a place that had 1 room left. And this 1 room came at an exorbitant price. I think we paid more than $400 for a room that normally costs probably $100 or $150. And so in this example, the scarcity of that commodity, a hotel room in this example, really drove up the price, and that really sucked. Another example of scarcity is if you're the only person who knows how to build a rocket and go to Mars, well, if a company needs somebody with that skill set, then you're very scarce. They can't find a lot of people with that skill set. And so to that company, your value in their eyes goes up significantly, and they're willing to pay you a lot more money to achieve their goals. Now, I do want to clarify, however, that scarcity does not always mean that something is going to be extremely valuable. For example, I could spit in this jar, and this is the only jar of spit in the world that has my spit in it. However, its value is extremely low. Okay, now that we understand what determines value a little bit better, if I were to go and draw my own banknote, for example, I drew this, and who's to say that it's not worth $9 where a $1 bill of US currency is worth $1? Or for the Office fans out there, what makes a US dollar worth more than a Schrootbuck, for example? What's a Schrootbuck, you ask? Let's ask Dwight. Dwight?
Listen up, come to the center of the room, please. This is a Schrootbuck.
Thank you, Dwight. That's what a shroot buck is. So while some people would say that a $100 bill or any of our paper currency in America is beautiful and is a work of art, and it is aesthetically pleasing, I don't think that this is actually what gives it its value. And so it's not the same as art where somebody subjectively thinks that this is something of value. No, I think that pretty much everybody in the United States agrees that US currency has an objective value to it. In other words, there's not just a small group of people in America who think that the US dollars and paper currency is very beautiful and therefore has a lot of value. Most people in America recognize the value of a US dollar and they're willing to accept them for services or goods. And just to further support my theory that the aesthetics of the US dollar is not the only thing that gives it its value, if the design were to change tomorrow, then the value of the dollar bills would still stay the same. So yes, while it's created by artists and it has artistic elements to it certainly, this is not what gives the US dollar its value. And we also know that the US dollar isn't very scarce per se, unless of course you're looking in my wallet where I only have $20. In fact, recently the government just decided to print another $1.9 trillion. And that's right, the government just prints this money. It's brand new and they're just creating more and more of it. And so this just goes to prove that this is not a scarce resource. If this is something that we can create as much as we want, whenever we want, basically, then it's not very scarce. Okay, so then what is it? What makes a US dollar actually valuable? Personally, I think that paper money has value because it's very useful. Instead of trading a bunch of horses for a car, for example, I can trade a bunch of pieces of paper for that same car. This is much easier to carry around, it's much easier for the person selling the car to accept, and overall it's just way more useful. The other reason that paper currency has value, in my opinion, is because everybody can reasonably expect that everybody else is going to recognize its value, and therefore we can reasonably expect to be able to trade it for things that we want. In a way, it comes down to it just being a social construct that paper money or precious metal or stones have any value at all. In general, in our collective minds, we all just kind of agree that these things hold value, and for that reason and that reason alone, they kind of do. And of course, precious metals and stones have always had a use in creating works of art or jewelry, but really when it comes down to it, they're no more than natural elements. Another interesting thing is that when the paper US dollar was first created, it actually was backed by actual physical silver. And that's probably because a lot of people didn't have a lot of faith in this just little piece of paper. And so in effect, when it was first created, it kind of piggybacked on the value of silver until it built up its own reputation and people recognized and acknowledged and accepted that it had its own value. In fact, some of the early US paper money had the words silver certificate printed across the top. And this basically meant that a person could take in this dollar bill and they could get a dollar's worth of silver anytime they wanted to. After the US dollar built up its reputation, however, the federal government decided to replace these silver certificates with what they called Federal Reserve notes. And basically, they're backed by absolutely nothing. And if you look at the top of some paper money today, you'll see the words Federal Reserve Note. Now this means that you can no longer take this little piece of paper in and exchange it for its value in silver. So it really is the case that this paper money is only backed by a social construct, or a group-wide unspoken agreement that this paper has some value to it. Another thing you should know is that the US government has in its history created some forms of paper money that it could, in its sole discretion at any time, demonetize. Sort of how YouTube demonetizes some of the coolest content on here. Anyway, if you'd like to learn more about emergency issue money, then check out my video next week because I'll be making a more in-depth video about this topic. So to wrap this up, basically the US dollar and all precious metals and stones are only valuable because everybody says they are. In other words, again, the US dollar is just a little piece of paper and it's totally worthless, unless everybody continues to say that they agree that it has some sort of value. One thing that will always have value though is you hitting that like button. So if you've enjoyed this video or if you've learned anything new, please consider hitting that thumbs up below. And if you'd like more content like this, consider subscribing as well. In case you didn't know already, all of my videos are about money, and I've got plenty of others you can go check out right now as well. And if you feel like I've left something out that goes into determining if something has value, well, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to learn more. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me for another video, and until next time. Mostly unharmed. Didn't even hurt it. Okay, so I got him. Almost lost it if I didn't have the string on.